Remedy Entertainment is known for taking its time with video game development, and Quantum Break is not an exception. Having released Alan Wake in 2008, the Xbox One exclusive, well, sort of, has a lot to live up to. Since there's a high-budget TV show produced around the game that's interwoven and influenced by in-game decisions, it's an indicator that this Finnish developer has potentially realized a dream to have a greater marriage between film and video games. The wait for Quantum Break seemed reasonable enough then, so has the Xbox One received its overdue system seller, or should it fall victim to the annals of time due to superficial elements that hide deeper problems? The story involves Jack Joyce, who's a carefree soul who thrives on his independence. He's traveling abroad to find himself while getting involved in petty illegal activities, and this mischievousness follows him with the game's opening. His friend Paul Serene invites him to test a time machine he helped construct alongside Jack's brother William, even though this is against his wishes since he believes the device needs corrections. Before Paul is able to walk through the machine with Jack on the outside helping, William tries to stop them both from going any further at gunpoint, but he's too late as the machine malfunctions, sending out an explosion of time energy. Paul disappears, and Jack is knocked unconscious. Jack wakes to discover he can manipulate chronon particles, a time energy that is, to freeze, slow down, or speed up time, which proves useful when a corporation called Monarch Solutions shows up with a private military to kill him and William. What makes its sudden appearance all the more surprising is that it's led by none other than a much older, more draconian version of Paul Serene himself. But how? What happened to him? What's going on with time itself? It's a wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey mess as Jack fights against Paul and his goons with old and new friends in a bid to save the world from time's end. So yeah, time travel is an overdone narrative subject, but Quantum Break has cool contributions to make with its complex grasp on time travel logic. The first half of the game may be confusing with what some characters will say and a few events that occur, but as you play you'll receive revelations about them that will make you exclaim, "So that's what happened all along." The reason why is that the past and future are in a constant battle with the characters trying to influence them both, so this gives more context and depth to previous plot points that will have you respecting the writer's consistent understanding of their own material, even if paradoxes, not necessarily bad ones mind you, are allowed. The characters are fine. Jack is a somewhat one-note character who rides the tides of his emotions, but I really appreciate how Paul is portrayed as a suave villain with worthy motivations that back all of his cold, calculating decisions in the name of the greater good. Side characters like Beth Wilder and William are good characters in their own rights, but their personalities are outshone by their time-traveling mishaps and adventures, which is what primarily defines them and makes them interesting to pay attention to with their intriguing backstories. Others, such as Martin Hatch, Charlie Wincott, Fiona Miller, and Liam Burke, take on lead roles in the TV show that plays between the game's acts. There are a few standout performances, but the likes of, say, Charlie and Fiona weren't my cup of tea and felt inconsequential, having minor or poorly implemented connections to the in-game story. Speaking of a TV show, it has impressive set pieces and special effects. While I didn't take to most of the characters themselves, I love the scenes involving Paul and his corporation. It gives you a good grasp of how Monarch is run from the top and what it's like from the perspectives of those who work within it. Now, the most unique aspect of the show is that episodes have different scenes and outcomes depending on junction impacts. There's small in-game sections where you play as Paul and are put in situations where you decide between two courses of action that will lead to personalized versions of the future. I don't like how they literally show you most of what will happen, but I definitely appreciated how your decisions ripple across both the game and show in drastic, sometimes surprising ways. It only made me want to play as Paul more, since the only thing you can do as him in these sections is just make those decisions. So yeah, Quantum Break's story may not quite pack the same punch as Alan Wake did with its out-of-the-box originality and compelling mysteries, but it's still a solid tale with a fairly well-rounded cast that secures much of its intrigue with time travel nonsense that, well, tries to make a lot of good sense. I mentioned that Jack obtained time-altering abilities from his exposure to chronon particles, and these attempt to make the third-person shooter gameplay stand out. However, the results are a hit and miss with some great mechanics and ideas surrounded by mediocre enemy encounters and design gripes. Starting with the core gameplay, the shooting mechanics are decent. A lot of the guns feel weak and lack a sense of weight compared to Alan Wake's weaponry, but at least there's over twice as many guns to experiment with and pick up while you're fighting. Most of the time you're either moving from cover to cover or craftily stringing together your time powers in the open. The former is actually guided by a contextual system where you never have to press a button to crouch, and while it does get a bit wonky on occasion, it doesn't present many problems when you need to back off from foes. When it's time to go hard, you've got several tricks up your sleeve like Time Shield, which briefly absorbs all damage that comes your way while allowing you to shoot freely from inside. Others like Time Dodge and Time Run respectively allow you to do a dash that essentially teleports you a short distance or slow down time to rush someone and perform a devastating melee attack. Two of my favorites are Time Stop and Time Blast, which you, again, respectively use by tapping RB to freeze an opponent in a bubble that absorbs all of your bullets, or holding that button to unleash a devastating explosion. The game shines brightest and is most rewarding when you're able to string these moves together and take out a group of bad guys within moments. But for some reason, attempting to do this feels a bit clunky in execution, not to mention slowly tiring as the hours go by. The reason behind that is that, even on the hardest difficulty, dealing with the AI is normally a breeze, since they're not that taxing. A generous amount of health makes dealing with them even more easy, with the exception of a few areas with surprising difficulty spikes. Whenever this happens, though, it's not that the AI gets smart, it's that the game just throws a bunch of bullet sponges at you. So you might find yourself at a standstill with no ammo, which is irritating. You would think melee attacks would be a good backup plan, but they're only possible with the Time Run ability that has limited uses. It's a standard mechanic that's bewilderingly absent here, since Jack seems perfectly capable of hitting and crouching foes with the butt of a gun, but nope. There are missed opportunities to expand on the way time powers could have been used, how enemies should work together, and how environments could have included more options to take out foes with creative methods. For example, several time powers and weapons encourage a CQC kind of approach, so a combo-based melee system / time powers could have increased the immersion of fights. Heck, wouldn't it have been nice to have a brief slow-mo period after performing a tough melee combo where you can shoot distant foes with ease? Unfortunately, in the actual game, when you do something like this, you're left awkwardly out in the open to be shot at once you take down one enemy or two with this close kind of approach. The abilities are fun while they last, yes, but they mask the game's lacking approach to the very ideas it could have done with its gameplay. Enemy groups have little varying types, and therefore don't take advantage of compromising your position by coordinating their efforts. Most of the AI would stay back or slowly approach me, leaving plenty of time to take pot shots with my gun or time powers to beat them. And part of the straightforward AI's unchallenging intelligence is the flat, undynamic level design that pervades action settings. While the environments are realistically convincing with their layouts and just generally how they look, they don't creatively complement the gameplay that well. This is also evident with the awkward platforming between encounters that has you getting past areas where time is broken, which are called stutters, with your abilities since objects around you act erratically to impede your progress, such as automatic doors that are sped up to dangerous speeds that you need to slow down and dash through to keep on going. You can also rewind time on specific objects to access new locations by, say, rebuilding a stack of boxes or reorienting a row of shelves that block your way. I would have preferred if more combat environments had been designed with opportunities to do this so you could alter objects for tactical advantages by reconstructing a path to access a tower you can snipe from, or making scaffolding collapse on some bad guys, but these kind of things are never presented to you during the gameplay. You can upgrade powers by finding chronon sources, and while these are helpful to prolong some of their effectiveness and damage, the system doesn't build upon powers with meaningful twists that challenge you to use them in new, exciting ways. Other than this, the interim between fights is not only occupied by that stilted platforming I mentioned, but also getting these narrative collectibles and engaging in character interactions. While the latter is worth your time, you'll groan at how lengthy the extraneous story details are to read. I paid attention to them at first, since they provide nice context to some characters' histories and relationships with one another, but it got to the point where there were so many that they destroyed the game's flow. I would end up taking 20 minutes to read several things in a single room, and, well, ain't nobody got time for that. Now, the game does have some levels with jaw-dropping scenes, visual effects, and cutscenes. The motion capture and detail with faces comes close to rivaling Uncharted 4, but what Quantum Break has that no other game can boast are those stutters. And to elaborate, they are a result of time breaking down due to the time machine explosion at the story's beginning. While normal people can't tell this is happening, Jack is able to operate outside these stutters to see moments where time freezes and causes reality to go berserk. Some things remain frozen, but a moving car or falling piece of debris will zoom back and forth during a stutter at varying speeds, which will cause it to turn up somewhere else when time resumes. In other words, time being messed up results in everything being out of sync, which creates these beautiful sceneries of chaos that Jack has to carefully navigate through due to how stutters unpredictably alter objects' motions, like so. I love the glassy, fractured look that time powers impose on things whenever you use them, which light up the environment with bright colors and leave ripples of energy once they dissipate. If there's any place Remedy should be highly commended, it's how this visual flair was crafted. Unfortunately, the Xbox One version does suffer from some graphical issues and limitations. Poor shadows, blurry effects, and 720p resolution reveal the console's notable restrictions. And one thing I could not stand is that characters have this excessive blur that leaves jarring echoes of motion. So, like, imagine you turn on your mouse pointer's trail and apply that to the game. Right? You know, like this. That's exactly what you'll see with the in-game models. Yes, their animation and facial expressions are surprisingly detailed, but that problem clashes with these achievements, which really speaks for the game's graphics on a large scale. I've mentioned how guns feel kind of weak to handle, and half of this is contributed to the oddly brittle audio used for gunshots. I can say that the rest of the sound effects are thorough, with specific attention put toward how time would sound if you could play around with it. The excessive bass, glass crackling, stressed electricity, that's kind of how time apparently sounds to Remedy, and I really love it, and how normal sound effects are extended, skipped, echoed, and distorted when affected by stutters or Jack's powers. Petri Alanko also empowers this eccentric soundscape with his subdued, heavy electronic tracks with high tempos, synthesizers, and weird effects like static mixed in with piano and electric guitars. It reminds me of Daft Punk's Tron soundtrack and Solarfield's work on Mirror's Edge. And lastly, I should add that all the actors and actresses, whether in-game or in the TV show, suit their respective roles well. I may have not gravitated towards some of the characters in themselves, but all of their performances are fitting regardless. The campaign will suck up about 10 hours of your time, which is an acceptable length. Each of the 4 episodes in between the game's acts is over 20 minutes, which all serve as appropriate breaks too. As for replay value and extra content, I think there's little motivation to go through the game again unless you're invested in the story. There are a boatload of events that only make sense as you play the game, so going back to experience them with a new perspective allows you to appreciate the depth of how they all string together. You could also take more time to read those long narrative items, but I don't think most people will replay the game unless they want to see how making different decisions at junction points will alter the live-action episodes. I love video games that push the medium by employing risky decisions or exploring uncharted territory. It does pay off on occasion, but even when it doesn't, I always respect developers who are daring enough to do this. Quantum Break seemed like it wanted to do this by bridging film and video games together in a profound way, but we're left with a product that not only feels a few years out of time, but also one that doesn't push the storytelling capabilities of its medium. The game does boast high production values with its show and captivating graphical effects, which are aided by a thoughtful story. However, most of this obscures half of the boring characters, and the TV shows focus on mostly uninteresting side characters. The audio may be great all around, but the fascinating visuals and gameplay are marred by unfortunate limitations, respectively from a technical and imaginative standpoint. So Remedy's passion and distinct games are to be admired, and Quantum Break is a partial demonstration of this. But the studio needs to step its game up and get with the times if it hopes to push back to the future with real substance to its content. I give Quantum Break a 6.75 out of 10.